Hello!
And welcome to Social Media Social Club, the podcast where we talk all things social media culture.
You have joined us for the first part of a very exciting double bill episode, an extravaganza, if you will. And we today are joined by our first ever external guest, and we are so excited to have Less Waste Laura with us today. Laura is a sustainability influencer, so we're really excited to talk to her about all things sustainability.
Absolutely.
In the first episode, what are we going to cover?
We're going to talk about her journey into becoming a sustainability influencer, talking about how some of the brands she's worked with, some sort of big case studies of kind of interesting green marketing faux pas, that kind of thing. So it was a really, really informative episode. I really enjoyed
Yeah, it was
both
great.
episodes.
Yeah, it was great to speak to Laura about that. And then if you join us back for part 2, we will be discussing her anti-vapes campaign, which took TikTok and social media by storm. So that's a really interesting one to come back and listen to in part 2.
Yeah, absolutely. And the bill for that is just passed in the UK government. So really exciting news for Laura. And yeah, it was just a really, really enjoyable podcast. So let's get into the first one without further ado. Here we go, a few weeks ago. I'm here as always with Hannah.
That's me.
Hello. My name is Josh, and today our first guest, who's not a Hydrogen staff member, we've got Laura here. Oh! So Laura, aka Less Waste Laura.
Full name.
Yeah,
Full title.
full
Yeah,
title.
thank you.
Full Sunday name.
It's here to talk to us a few different things under the umbrella of sustainability. So Laura, would you like to introduce yourself first and give us a bit of your sort of background, who you are, what you're all about?
Sure. Okay, so Laura, good starting point.
Yes.
I guess I spend my time doing two things. So my day job, which I should spend more time actually doing, is I'm a PhD researcher. So I'm a climate scientist looking at how we become more resilient to climate change and how we do it with communities, so community engagement. And I am in my second year of doing that. So still don't really know anything about it, but try my best. So that's like my day job. But I'm also a sort of environmental pundit. So I do loads of campaigning around environmental issues, and I've done that for years, ever since like falling in love with geography at school and then realising that was my passion. So I do loads of campaigning on issues like plastic waste, climate change, disposable vapes, that's the big one. And that kind of takes loads of form. So I do loads of it online, Less Waste Laura, that's where I sort of exist. But then do loads of it in stuff like the media, so kind of get rolled out to comment on environmental stories and work with loads of different organisations to try and help everybody be more sustainable. So that's kind of like in a nutshell
Nice.
what I do.
And when did because obviously it's something you've been passionate about for a long time, but when did the persona of Less Waste Laura kind of begin?
I know, why
feel
did
like-
she come out this
Yeah.
So,
When did you start presenting as Less Waste Laura?
Exactly. I know. To be honest, like it actually kind of happened by accident. So 2018, we just had Blue Planet 2, so David Attenborough documentary. Everybody was thinking about plastic and waste. I was at university at the time doing geography and environmental science, so it was kind of all my world was about environmental stuff. But in 2018, on January 1st, I was like trying to think of a New Year's resolution. And because all this had been floating around, I thought maybe that's what I should try this year, try and like be more sustainable, whatever that looks like. So I decided that 2018, I was going to try and tackle my waste, my carbon footprint, like see where it goes. And really, really quickly, actually, into that January, loads of people were asking like, oh, what was the products that you started using? Like, were you talking about a bar of shampoo? What is that? Or I've got a question about this. Can it be recycled? Or like all these questions were coming up. And I found myself constantly like texting people about it. And I suddenly thought I should probably start writing all this down because I'm doing all of this and trying it and testing it out. And I've got all this knowledge. And I was at uni, so I had all the kind of scientific stuff to back it up. So in that January, I thought, okay, I'll start with Instagram because I'm not great with words. So I could do like, put up a photo of something, explain a bit. And I thought I'll keep it separate so that none of my actual friends need to follow it if they don't want to. I don't want to become that eco nut that they all have to follow. So I literally just started an Instagram page and I called it Less Waste Laura because at the time there was people talking about like zero waste and it all felt a bit extreme. Whereas I was like, I'm just trying like my best, and I started documenting it. So like if you were to scroll right back to the beginning, it literally was like, this is a shampoo bar, this is why it's better, this is how I use it, da 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 da.
Yeah.
And over the years, it's obviously gone from like a directory of products I was trying out to like a space for more kind of campaigning and stuff. So that's been what, like 5 years now that I've had it, and it's kind of grown from that and kind of got this whole big following, which is fab.
Yeah, I think there's something you said there about less waste as opposed to zero waste,
Yeah.
which we'll definitely come back to because I think that's a really, really interesting point. But before we go into that, I just want you were at COP28
Yes.
as well,
Yeah.
just a few days ago.
Yeah, just a
Well,
few days ago.
this will
When
be
this
in
goes out.
2024.
So,
So it'll be
last month.
a little while ago, but when as a filming, yeah. So
Yeah.
how was that experience? Because obviously, you're saying you come. Was this your first time visiting COP?
Well, so this is my third time
Was
going
your
to COP.
third
So
one?
for people
Well,
who
of
don't
course,
know,
Glasgow, yeah.
Yeah, so COP it stands for Conference of the Parties, parties being countries. So it's a United Nations summit. It happens every single year where nearly 200 countries come together to talk about climate change. And this one is COP28, so it's the 28th time it's happened, and it goes all around the world. So, like, if people are based in the UK, they've probably heard of COP26 in Glasgow in 2021. It was then in Egypt, and then this time it was in the UAE and Dubai. So I've been to the last three. And it's a bit mind-boggling because partly you've got nearly 100,000 people that all come to one place for 2 weeks, like it's a really long time to discuss climate change. And when we talk about climate change, it's not just climate change, it's everything from energy, renewable energy, nuclear energy, to oceans, fishing, to nature, trees, forestation, to food. Like, it's so broad.
So ambitious.
It's so ambitious, and it covers everything. So it's quite a mind-boggling experience. And you're looking around going, this is the whole world represented. Like, there's literally people from everywhere. But it's kind of difficult because it feels like it's so sometimes detached from, like, reality or real life. So, like, a lot of the work that I do here in Scotland is, like, with people, with communities, and you're physically going out and, like, doing litter picks or planting trees or, like, talking to school kids or whatever it might be. It's very, like, tangible. Whereas these things, it's talking about global targets. Like, one of the things that came out of this one was about tripling renewable energy capacity globally by 2030, and you're like, oh my word, like, that's a huge thing. But ultimately it, takes little people on the ground to do it. So yeah, that's where I've been. That's a big part of my work. So I kind of go out and I do a lot of the media. So I do, like, regular stints back home on things like BBC Scotland, BBC 5 Live, Times Radio. Like, I try and sort of bring back what's happening and communicate it to people so that they understand what it is and what's going on, but also so that when we come back we can say, here's what Scotland and the UK said, so let's, like, hold them to account for these things the rest of the year. Yeah.
In terms of, like, holding to account, because you're talking about the kind of world stage here, and there's a lot of different people saying a lot of different things. It's a huge, I don't know, like, it's a huge task to kind of condense those ideas and bring them back to people. It's all about the language.
I know.
I feel.
I mean, what the whole outcome of COPs is, you get this text agreement that everybody agrees to, so all the countries agree to it. And there's so much back and forth because you've got countries who are, like, low-lying island states literally disappearing underwater, and then you've got massive oil states that are like, well, we're sitting on billions of pounds, trillions of pounds worth of revenue, so we don't want to stop using fossil fuels. And then you've got everyone in between. So I think it's really difficult to kind of get a text that everybody's happy with. Nobody's happy with it in the end, but everyone's happy with it because nobody's won, nobody's lost, but everyone kind of loses. So it's quite difficult. One of the main things, though, that I think is a barrier is climate change is used as a political football. And actually, it doesn't really matter what your opinion is on climate change, it's happening. So whether you think it is or not, like, it is happening, and it's going to keep affecting it. So I think the frustration is we have globally, like, world leaders and governments who are brought in who have different views on how to tackle it, but in the background, it keeps rumbling on and it keeps getting worse.
Yeah.
And that's a really, like, difficult thing because we had a new president of Brazil come in called Lulu, and he was, like, super progressive and he's doing loads of stuff. But for decades, Brazil's been on the back foot for doing stuff and happily deforesting, some of the most vital areas. But then in the same way, like, here in the UK, we hosted this summit 2 years ago, but now we've got some of the worst track record for, like, rolling back on policies. So it can be quite frustrating that it's a political football because actually it should be something that everyone just agrees on. Like, science is clear, it's happening. But I think the thing I always don't understand is, see, when we talk about climate solutions, there's so much benefit that can be brought from it. Like, the classic example I always think of is, do you know what a 20-minute neighbourhood is? Or have you heard that concept?
Is it in terms of, like, a walkable community?
Yeah. So it's basically that. So it's this idea that for so long we've been building these, like, massive housing estates in the UK, and you've got, sometimes, like, 10,000 houses and they'll be like at shop or like at school and like nothing else. And so we've got these communities that completely rely on cars, and it's like concrete jungles, there's like no nature, no green space.
That is something that I've noticed quite a lot of people talking about recently, is walkable communities, and I think it's a really, really important thing in terms of it being like a small incremental change. In terms of the marketing of that, I think is really interesting, and it kind of comes back to COP a little bit, and it comes back to what you're saying about being less waste as opposed to being zero waste. There are so many, and I think it's what makes climate conversations really inaccessible for people a lot of the time, is that the semantic details are what ultimately changes huge legislation, but it also changes just the way we talk about them amongst ourselves. So when we talk about like marketing a 20-minute neighbourhood, it sounds, because that's a really appealing way to describe it, I think. But when you talk about it in the way that some political parties will talk about it, like they're trying to take away our freedom from cars, especially in America, where it's so car-centric, how much do you think there's how do you think we can fix this problem in communicating these ideas to people?
And to be honest,
through social media and stuff, you know?
This is it, right? This is the key thing, because I think we need more people who are confident communicators who can translate the science and translate the policy to how regular people understand it, because that's the best way of being able to tell a story, rather than having scaremongering about, you know, the government's trying to take your car away from you and trying to ban you from city centres. Actually, it's saying, look at this amazing opportunity we have to clean the air for everybody who uses it. But I mean, I certainly think in my research kind of life as well, I'm really trying to push academics to be like, don't just publish a paper, like communicate what is going on here, like tell the story. And I think that's when you bring most people along, and it's about the positives. You know, I think even like another good example, I've probably got loads of these, so tell me to shut up when I'm rambling. Like one of the great ones is when we talk about infrastructure in the UK. So we talk about needing to save energy, needing to save carbon emissions. We need to be getting like insulation in houses, and we need to get double glazing, right? That's not exactly sexy. And also talking about carbon emissions is a bit like, whoa, like what really is that? And people are like, all these environmental nutters, all they care about is like carbon emissions that are imaginary. So what actually it's important to do is say, in the UK, there are people living with no dignity because they've got mold coming through their walls, they've got leaking roofs, they've got like they've got single glazing that is like keeping them cold, and they are pouring money down the drain to their energy providers. I want people to live with dignity in a warm house that is watertight, that doesn't have mold coming through, so that they can have their friends over, save some money, and like that's what you talk about. It also just so happens to save lots of energy, which is great. And I think it's about how we communicate this stuff.
100%.
And I think I'm sort of fed up of talking about a polar bear on a little iceberg. I want to talk about the flourishing world that we can get and all the benefits, and it's also really good for the environment.
Do you feel like that's something that you're part of on like social media then, actually communicating these ideas in that way that really resonates with people? Do you feel that there is a kind of community of like influencers and creators that are really trying to do that and to speak that type of language and tell that story?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think we're getting there. You know, I think there are some pretty extreme environmental influencers, to kind of use that term, who do put a lot of people off, because they kind of talk about like sacrifice, like you're going to have to give up all your favourite food, you're going to have to buy absolutely nothing new, you can never go on holiday again, and it's quite like scary. And I think it's not about watering down the message, but it's about saying, actually, how can we talk to people that they're going to listen and find that mutual ground? And I think it is about, like, I remember I was at this conference a couple of years ago, and I was sat next to this fashion influencer, and I was like, literally couldn't be from different worlds, right? Like, she's promoting fast fashion, I'm promoting slow fashion, and like, we were quite up against it. But actually, through conversation, like, we found common ground, like things that we were interested in, and like, neither of us were criticising each other. It was actually just a really lovely conference, and didn't really think too much of it. She then got back in touch because we followed each other, and like partly I rolled my eyes every time I saw her post, but I was like, she's lovely, and I'm gonna like keep looking at it. But I was always like, I wonder what she thinks when she sees what I'm posting. And like 18 months on from that, she actually got in touch, because I think I never engaged with her on social media. Like, I wasn't exactly liking any of her stuff, so she kind of disappeared. Like, I sort of didn't really see her. The algorithm sort of took her away. But she got back in touch about 18 months later and was like, I don't know if you've seen, but I've been like really, really working on my brand and like all this kind of stuff, and I'd like love to catch up with you because I'd love some advice. And I was like, why on earth is she emailing me? Like, this is so weird. And then I realised, over the last 18 months, she'd gone on this huge journey, realising the true cost of fashion and realising like how much of an issue it was. And she'd completely rebranded herself, but in a really genuine way. And now all she talks about is sustainable, secondhand fashion, soul fashion. So she was actually like, help me, like I want to learn, and like I've done all this stuff. And now I'm like, she's one of the leading UK secondhand fashion influencers.
That's amazing. Like,
And that's what you need to do though with people.
Yeah.
It's like you need to find it and be like, you can still love fashion or food or travelling or whatever, but there is a way of doing it in a more
I
sustainable way.
think that's it. It's like, I mean, it's what we talk about in any client, no matter what it is, it's very applicable there, because you're just doing the thing that you do and making it seem fun and accessible. And I think that's what's kind of great about social media in general, is that you can kind of democratize these really kind of high level ideas and stuff. But
I think that's great that she's been able to still create the content that she loves and still be in that space that she's passionate about and enjoys, but do it in a way that feels much more like, because she probably feels so much better about herself. Like there must have been part niggling in the back of her head constantly, like I feel like I'm contributing to something that I don't agree with here, but she's then been able to actually turn that into something positive. And I think that kind of comes into what you were saying, like wanting to be called less waste instead of zero waste. It's like you don't need to change your whole life, you just need to try and do something, and people respond to that as well. I think that feels very like human and authentic. People are instantly turned off when it's like you feel like you're kind of preaching at them and telling them that you have to change and you have to do this, but it's more just like, just do that little change today and see if that makes any impact. You're not an awful person because you bought that new dress that one time. Like I think it's about the language and how we tell those stories. But I think that's where it's like quite interesting space for like influencers in particular, because there's so much opportunity for them to still do that job, but just do it in a slightly different way.
I think so. I don't know. I think when you, how you were saying about like it kind of sort of, doom and gloom kind of posting, for lack of a better term, in terms of, because I do see stuff like that, and I'm not going to name specifics but I know exactly the kind of ones you're talking about. And I do think, but when you speak to people like that in personal experience, like it just makes them hold on to what they've got tighter, because they're like, oh well, if it's not gonna count for anything anyway, I'm just gonna hold on to the things that I really love, and I'm gonna keep doing the things I really love instead of making these small incremental changes. But I think that's that kind of brings
like
it to
like to me it's similar with, it's people get in their mindset, they're like, oh, someone's going to talk about sustainability, or like even with you being vegan, it's like, oh, I know what people are like when they're vegan. Then when you meet someone who does live a more sustainable life or is vegan, and they don't preach that on you, they're there if you want some advice, or that's just the way they're living their life. The more people that you interact with that are making positive changes but not forcing it on you in that kind of negative way, the more you just become comfortable with that. And I think that's like more, that feels like a way to make positive change that's not punishing people, and it feels more like, oh, just if you want to be part of this, you can.
I think a well-researched kind of friendly approach to it is the best thing to do. I also think sometimes they're afraid to get things wrong. What's your thoughts on that?
I think transparency is the key, right? And there's lots of brands that have done it well and brands that have done it like completely wrong. Like there was a sort of catastrophic example of H&M, where there's Fashion Revolution, who do loads of great stuff in the world of fashion. They released this thing called the Transparency Index. So they look at the kind of top 100 global brands, and they look at how transparent their supply chains are, and they rank them. And it was in lockdown, so it must have been 2020 or 2021. H&M came out top for this transparency index. So they did this huge push out on social media. We're like, we are the #1 most transparent brand in the world. #sustainability, #, right? First of all, you're not the most transparent in the world. You're the most transparent out of the ones that they looked at.
That's so true.
And two, transparency does not equal good. It just means you're transparent. And in their case, they were transparent about being bad, right? There's a lot of change was awful.
I'm the next bit, at least I'm honest
Yeah,
about
like
it.
you can see that we are really bad. And so, like, but they managed to twist it in a way that sort of made you feel a bit icky, because you thought you've taken something and tried to greenwash by putting even like the #sustainability. You're like, it's got nothing to do with sustainability. That's just about your supply chain being transparent. So like that was a sort of catastrophic example. But then you also get brands that I think have in the past tried really, really hard and have been doing the right thing, but sort of lose their way a wee bit. So Oatly, maybe as a vegan you quite like them, but
yeah, I've got mixed feelings about it. Like,
But one of the things is like, as a brand, you know, they've really started like grassroots. You know, really were trying to, you know, make alternative milk available to the masses, and like, you know, I think really had a good heart in the beginning.
They had a good thing going, like, for sure.
They did, and I think one of the things that, and this is where the downfall came, is they talked about themselves being the best. They talked, like, their marketing was like, we are your friend, like, we're your pal, and we're doing all this stuff. So you did feel like you knew the brand a bit more than other global brands, like Alpro. Do you know, I've never seen an Alpro advert sort of thing.
Yeah,
So they kind of had this, like, we're your good buddy who's trying to save the planet and da-da-da. And then long story short, they took some really unethical money.
Is it Blackstone Foundation?
Yeah,
I think it was. Yeah.
And this money is like the kind of, when you look, chase it back, like this investment firm has ties to all sorts of stuff that you just, is really, really bad. And they like just dealt with it really, really poorly, because they'd all along been like, we're your really good friend and we're the wee guy and we're trying, you need to help us out. And then it just went catastrophically wrong. So they took this bad money and then they handled the press with it really, really badly. And I think that shows you that it's also important for brands to be transparent. And I think, yeah, it can get a bit messy, but what I say is it's just about being honest and about like showing where you're failing, showing where you're doing really well, and not being afraid. But I think it's just about being genuine and not trying to like twist things in a certain way.
I think so, yeah. I think that applies to individuals as well. Like, you'll get, I don't really trust people who are too, like, I'm not including yourself in this, but maybe like, because obviously that's your job. But more like, I'm more mean and like individuals who are maybe like, you're wrong for doing this and I'm this and I'm better than you for like this. That comes across as really disingenuous, and then they burn out. Do you know what I mean? And I think that's Oatly kind of remind me of that person a little bit, where it's like they made a big show of it, and then when they actually got caught, you know, kind of like doing something that wasn't great, it made it all the worse. When in actual fact, if they had just been honest about what they were doing, had just kind of
being transparent,
like, and just kind of admitted to, or not even admitted, but not drawn so much attention to their successes, that when their failures do come around, which generally they always do at some point, like you've not got such a steep downfall, I suppose. I don't know. I just feel like that's. I mean, it's good advice for life as individuals, but also like for brands like across the world, like no matter what you're doing.
And I think I would just say though, like I think it's important though for brands to also invite people in. I'm not plugging myself. You should always invite me in, but like
please plug yourself.
I'm available for hire. I'll come and give you that. But like actually, if you bring in people who are external to your brand, who are like genuinely authentic voices in this space, if you're talking about sustainability or anything really, I think that can help you with some of your messaging, or even, you know, I've done like various different projects. So I did like a project with Volkswagen, who have a huge scandal sustainability wise about all that kind of Dieselgate stuff that went on. But I got asked to come and do a project with them around electric cars. They have this like electric ID buzz thing. And like one of the things I was really concerned about is I was like, can I ask, because I had did this interview with the chief exec, and I was like, can I ask anything? Like, what's the constraints? They said, yeah, of course, like, you're the expert and we want you to come in, like, nothing's off the table. And it's the same with other brands. I've done stuff with, like, Scottish Power and their wind farm here and, like, other brands. And I think that's important because it's it's an external voice who's not being paid. Like, I'm not an employee, so I'm not sort of, like, doing the party line. I'm there to just talk about it in the round.
You're there to be you,
And I think that can be really important for brands who are wanting to step into the world of sustainability or talk about it, is say, bring in someone else who can like read the room for you, but also tell you like, this is good, this is bad, here's how I would say this, and here's what you could work on. Because I think that helps it, because you can definitely tell when a brand's just doing it off their own back and they don't really have any clue, and then it all falls apart because it gets picked apart by people like me.
Green Claims Code, that's obviously something that I think people who are kind of around sustainability are aware of.
Yeah.
How much do you know about it?
Nothing.
So
I'm obviously not around.
But like the Green Claims Code is basically like, it's to do with like advertising standards and language you can use, language you can't use.
Okay.
And I think that's where certain people like H&M, like you mentioned, have been caught up. And how effective do you think the current legislation is? Because I feel like before we got into disposable vapes and en masse, the language around disposable and things like that is still kind of difficult. And there's obviously, you mentioned hashtag sustainability and what have you as well. How do you think that's enough at the moment? Do you think there needs to be more policing consultants need to be more of a thing to make sure these things are managed properly?
Yeah, so I mean, to really make it quite basic, to education point. But so if I was to make like a face cream, so I make a face cream and I'm selling it, I can use the words eco-friendly, green, sustainable, natural, and there's absolutely no threshold that I need to meet.
That's wild.
Even though I'm making it and you have no idea like how I'm making it or what's in it, well, there's ingredients on it probably, but you're going to be sitting there going, oh, amazing, natural face cream, fab, right? What does that actually mean?
So that language is just available to use.
Available to use. And so what we've had now is we've had the Advertising Standards Agency realise that we've had things like airlines talking about flights being sustainable, and they've stepped in and gone, right, okay, we need to set some boundaries. And so I think what's been happening is slowly there's been examples and regulations put in. So lots of airlines have got pulled up for messaging around sustainability and eco-friendly stuff, because it is just nonsense when it comes to that. There's also stuff like artificial grass, like plastic grass companies now can't say it's eco-friendly, like it's good for the environment, because it just isn't.
Yes.
And I think there's other ones now kind of coming up around, how do we brand things and what words can we use? The frustrating thing about it, because I think it is on the move, the frustrating thing is it's all retrospective. So adverts go out en masse, people see them, are influenced by them, and then the complaints come in.
So there's no approval process, things
No.
need to go through, right? Yeah.
And so I know we're going to get onto the disposable vape stuff, but I actually put in a complaint against a vaping company who did a green awareness. It was Elf Bar, right? It was. It's all out there now. The ruling's been made. So Elf Bar decided to do a green awareness campaign talking about the recyclability of their products, talking about how sustainable they were. And it was just BS, right? So I put in a complaint along with other people listing, why these were such an issue and why this ad was wrong. And it's now been ruled that they cannot do advertising like that again. They had to take them down, they got in trouble, but the ads were already out there. And it took months for them to come to that decision. So it is a slow process, but it does mean that now vaping companies, as an example, or airlines or plastic grass manufacturers, like they now realise that there's a line that they can't cross. But it's frustrating that we have to like case by case get there and put in the complaints. And so it's almost like an extra thing in my like workload is like constantly putting in these complaints, because eventually we'll get a ruling. But it's a good thing in a way, but I just think there isn't enough boundaries set around what language we use, and it tricks people and people fall into these traps.
Well, the thing is, it's huge as well. Like, there's not enough consequence to doing this, because once they would go, oh, whoops, oh, sorry, we didn't know.
Yeah.
Like, and then that'll just keep happening, and you'll keep. It's like whack-a-mole kind of thing.
Absolutely.
Do you know what I mean?
But if they've already had it out for like a few months, like the damage is done, essentially.
Exactly. It always reminds me of this Mitchell Webb sketch, which is talking about Garnier Nutrice. And it's like, that's the best thing you ever come up with, saying a word that sounds like nutrition but doesn't guarantee it. Like, it's so like everything that we see just now.
That's so true. It doesn't mean anything, but it just sounds like...
Sounds great.
You're like, oh. I know. And to be honest as well, in the world of like sustainability, so fossil fuels are natural.
Yes.
Right? Like dinosaurs millions of years ago died, fell to the bottom of the ocean, and over time have made fossil fuels. So you can claim that's natural.
Yeah.
Because it is.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean it's good for you. It doesn't mean you want to put it on your
Derived
face.
from waste products.
Exactly, right?
I.e. dinosaurs.
Yeah. And I think this is where like these words just, get completely like mixed up. And I think even in the world of things like, we're seeing a lot of compostable items. And like, what does that actually mean? It's only going to get composted if it gets put into an industrial composter. If you put it in your garden or you put it in the landfill, it's still going to exist in 400 years. So there's all these things that are like quite clever tactics in marketing that are just greenwashing, and we need to fight against that.
But of course, the effect on that then is, see if you're just like brand new to social media and you're working as a marketer or anything like that, and you're like at exec level or something, and you've got your tasked with writing a sustainability post. You might not know that then as well. You might, even though you're the one kind of doing that, you might be unwittingly doing that, even though you're not necessarily, because you've all this stuff from brands at a higher level has kind of seeped into how you think about these things, and that's ultimately going to be problematic. Because I know for a fact when we're kind of making content and stuff, it's not ever something that we really have to. I mean, we check it in our own way, but there's not like any kind of obviously legislation around it. There's no kind of like real safeguards. You can say anything really, like, and obviously like you're saying, you might face repercussions down the line, but you also might not, especially if you're a smaller brand, because
Yeah.
it's great for, kind of higher level stuff like H&M, but there's kind of, like if you're just a brand that's got like 10k, 20k followers, you can probably get away with quite a lot.
Yeah. But I think the one skill that I think is just missing in the world in general, but I think with a lot of brand stuff, it's just critical thinking.
Yeah.
Like, just take a minute and like a classic example is all these brands now doing sustainable vegan leather.
Yes.
It's plastic. It's plastic, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
well, let's spade a spade.
Yeah.
But they're talking about this vegan leather as if it's polyester or it's like
Yeah.
literally just plastic.
Yeah.
And it's like, take a second and ask yourself, what is this made of? What does that actually mean? And maybe think about how you market it. And I think that, is the real frustration, is like people just aren't thinking.
Yeah.
And, it comes with everything though. Like, companies are so obsessed with like, what's the most sustainable, disposable cutlery and plates and cups that we can get. And I'm like, reusables is the most sustainable. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah,
It's still,
just
you're still
cutlery.
chuffing it away.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
Or people are talking about what's the most sustainable electric car. The bus.
Yeah,
Like, why, and I think sometimes that's, and also, I guess the final other point is, not everything is sustainable, so don't try and make it. So if you're an airline, guess what? You're just not sustainable,
Yeah.
so don't try and pretend you are. I've got more respect for companies that just don't attempt to greenwash than like try to somehow fit into this box. And I think
Yeah.
it's just about recognising that some stuff inherently is not sustainable.
Yeah.
And that's okay, like as long as you're being honest about it. And like the Oatly thing was interesting because a lot of people were saying, well, hold on a minute, Alpro is this huge global kind of brand that does alternative milks, and they're owned by this massive dairy firm.
Yeah.
I thought, yeah, but they're not out there saying that they're the best. Oatly are.
Yeah.
So it's about
Yeah.
like, it's not about saying that they are better and they're not. It's about saying at least they're not trying to fool us into thinking that they're this perfect brand.
We want to say something, and I'm like, if you've not got anything to say, don't
make
say
it up.
anything.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Like, it's the same thing, because we have the same thing every year when Pride comes around. It's like, do you have something to say?
Yeah.
Or are you just putting a Pride flag on your logo? Like, just don't do it then.
Yeah.
Like, only say something if there is something you need to say, if you're making a change, if you're doing something.
Yeah.
Like, there's no point in just be like, it's like a tick box exercise. Like, right, so we need to cover something about sustainability, and we need to say something about this. Like, and it just shouldn't be that way. But then it's funny then that it does kind of fall to us, like the marketing team, to be like, maybe you shouldn't do that. And it's like, it's got all the way down through every part of a big company,
Yeah.
to the point where they're talking to their social media agency and saying, good to go. And
Yeah.
we're like, is it?
Who is effectively just some guy.
Yeah.
Do you know? Like
Yeah,
basically
some
just
guy.
some guy who
Is that
is doing. I'm some guy. Yeah, in this situation, like, and like you might have someone who knows a bit more. You might not.
Yeah.
It's
'Cause
just
that's
your
that thing
luck.
when it comes to, but it's like when you were saying earlier, it could be someone who's just straight in the door and they'll be like, yeah, of course, I'll put that out, of course.
Yeah.
But it might be that it's someone who's come up against this stuff before and has the confidence to kind of push back and say, if you've not got anything to say, if you're just doing a post that is, so we care about
Yeah.
sustainability. So if you do too,
Like,
join us. Yes, follow us for more.
So let's kind of let's read out this section with 5 things on the screen, 5 words that we've kind of. So if it said transparency,
Yep.
be realistic,
Yep.
treat people with dignity.
Yep.
What else have I mentioned?
These are all words. I think we need 5 things.
3 things.
5 points.
4 points.
Okay, we're done.
I think I'm trying to kind of like to round off. These are the most important things that you need to think about. And do you know what? It's okay to ask for help
Yeah.
as well. Like to
Yeah.
ask someone like yourself. Like,
God, I think that's so true about everything
Yeah.
ever.
So, transparency.
Yeah.
Be realistic. Be honest.
Dignity.
Dignity.
Oh yeah.
And don't be afraid to ask for help.
Oh, that was really good, Joss.
Five.
High five.
Yeah, there we go.
Your 5 key takeaways.
Josh's 5 things that he learned from Laura today. Thanks for joining us. That was part 1 of 2 with Less Waste Laura. Once again, thanks to Laura for joining us. If you want to follow us on social, we're at socialmedia.socialclub. Whereabouts, Hannah?
On Instagram and TikTok, and you can also find us over on YouTube if you're not already there, which you might.
Already there. If you are there though, subscribe, like, comment, and then on Friday, see when that rolls around on Spotify, Apple Music, any streaming platforms, give us 5 stars, give us a review.
5.
5s, no less. Not interested otherwise.
Yeah.
So yeah, thanks very much for joining us for part 1. We'll see you again next week for part 2.
Woo!